My name's Rick Marr. I'm the founder and visionary of Turning Point Human Capital Management. And just quickly about me and my business, Turning Point Human Capital Management was started in 2010. Since 2010, we've worked with over 2,000 businesses across the country. And all those businesses that we've taken on as clients have come from referrals or transfers of trust from over 3,000 different partners across the country. So I've gotten the opportunity to speak to a lot of different fractionals over these past couple of years, more than, as I said, more than 3,000, and just talking to folks and asking similar types of questions in each of the conversations and understanding where people are absolutely succeeding, killing it, and those that are saying, hey, how can I do this better? And what am I missing? Right. And one of the themes that always seems to come up is around stickiness, right? And fractionals. Many of us have this challenge of how do we create this stickiness that it makes it nearly impossible in a good way for our clients to stay with us for longer periods of time. So this title, "No Stickiness for Fractionals," was inspired by the by the movie title "No Country for Old Men." So no stickiness for fractionals. Why, and what to do about it. So we're going to talk about what it is, define it, define what the problem is, define how it affects us all, and then what we can do about it. So my intention is to go through this presentation in about 25 to 30 minutes. And then we can go to a question and answer session through the chat function. So the fractional problem, right? So think about the fractional. When I say fractional, I'm using that term in a generic sense. So I'm thinking about coaches, consultants, outsourced types of folks, 1099s, really anyone who's providing professional services to firms outside of outside the employee, right? So the problem with this fractional model, again, the generic term fractional model, is it's made to fail in the long term, right? There's no anchor. There's nothing holding us or nothing that's tethering us that client can't leave without us, right? So the other thing that we see, that part of the problem in the model, is what we call Mary Kay and Tupperware selling, right? So for those of you, I make this model in jest. Obviously, those are two hugely successful organizations, but typically when someone gets involved in one of these things, for the most part, the rank and file person, the first thing that they do is they go to their family and friends, right? And their family and friends will buy something or do something, and it makes them, happy and all that kind of good stuff. But then there's this problem. Once the family and friends run out, then that person, for the most part, there's several very successful, obviously many successful people, but for the most part, their business in that Mary Kay and Tupperware selling starts to die out, right? So in the fractional space, again, the generic term fractional, we also see this, whereas a lot of folks, they have a handful of really close relationships that when they start their fractional practice, they become clients of theirs. And that's all well and good, and those are great. But then there's this time when those are running out, right? Or those projects are ending. And now it's time to go out to the next set of people, right? And that's where it becomes much more difficult. So whether it's a client who's some relationship that we had, or a new client or a new relationship that we developed, the whole goal is to create stickiness, but the whole problem is that our model is not built around stickiness. So what do I mean by that? For the most part, again, these are generalized terms, so certainly we can get down to granular when we get to the discussion point. What most fractionals, generic fractionals, are selling are time and hands, right? I'm selling my time, my hands to do work for you. And if there's no work, there's no pay, right? So think about that model, right? So how do we overcome that? And what are the challenges that no work equals no pay does to us as business leaders of the fractional outsourced consultant practice? The second thing that's a problem in this model is that we can be seen as very replaceable, right? First, the most easy thing is there's tons of other there's very few fractionals, coaches, consultants, et cetera, who are so unique that there's not a gazillion other people out there. As an HR firm, we know this, right? And I think a lot of other firms do that. So we're replaceable in the sense, right? So we could be replaced with an internal employee. We could be replaced with another fractional, or doing nothing is that when the client decides to do nothing, hey, I'm not going to do that anymore. We're being replaced in a different way. So in all these examples, we're acting as a quote unquote employee, right? We're replaceable. The third thing that's the problem is typically for most of us, what we're selling is our intellectual capital. And we're using that as the ace in the hole, right? Hey, I have this incredible knowledge that I'm bringing to the world, and they're lucky to have me. And that's true, right? But there comes a point in time where that intellectual capital, as we're giving it to them, to the clients, that ace in the hole, its importance starts to diminish over time, right? And then the final general problem that goes along in this model is risk concentration, right? Think of, most fractional practices, consultants, coaches, it's one person or a very small team of people that are doing it all. They're getting the clients, they're doing the marketing, doing sales, but then they're also working on the clients. So there's a finite number of clients that they can work on at any given time or have as clients, right? So maybe it's 3 or 5 or something along those lines. So there's this concentration of risk that goes along with that, because we get too busy on each client. The client asks us to do something, they call us at 6 o'clock at night, whatever it may be, we're almost going back to replaceable, acting like an employee because we only have a handful of clients at any given time. Additionally, the other side of that is because we're doing the work, that risk concentration, as we'll see in future slides, starts to create a knock-on effect, which is I'm so busy working on the client, I can't go get the next clients, right? So I'm building a model that is not only not sticky, right? But the risk is all on me as the business leader because I'm doing all the work for that client, right? So that's the fractionals problem. What are the client's problems, right? Think about things that almost we can't control as fractional consultants or coaches, right? So for us, fractionals, the client, we're only getting part of their picture, right? So when we're working in our world, our silo, if you will, we have that picture, but we don't have the rest of the business picture, right? The business leader controls that. So there's a knock-on effect. Let me give you some simple ones that I've heard about recently. We've been hearing quite a bit about people who are losing clients because their client lost their clients, right? There's this knock-on effect, and there's nothing that we can do to control that, right? In many instances, if a client's a law firm and their biggest client left them or stopped paying them or is paying late, right? Here's another one. We have clients that may be paying late to our clients. So therefore, our client says, I have to stop my work with you, slow it down, put it off, whatever it may be. So from a client perspective, the common themes are we don't understand their complete picture. So anything that affects their business that we can't control is ultimately going to affect our business, right? The second client problem that we are hearing quite a bit about, or that fractionals, coaches, and consultants struggle with, is that we've now been so good at what we do that we've solved their problem, right? So in many instances, that's part of the model of fractional, but it also creates a problem for all of us in creating that recurring revenue and stickiness and all that kind of stuff. But when we solve their problem, think of a restaurant. You go to a restaurant, you order a meal because you're hungry. You eat the meal and you say, well, I'm not hungry anymore. That's why I came here. So why should I pay for this, right? So when we solve their problems, their pain, that when they hire us, and then we solve that and they're no longer in that same pain, they start to say to themselves, why should I continue to pay for this service, right? So again, that's something we can't control. Another part of the model is that these programs, these things are not forever, right? So if you go back to our client, our problem, right? We get too busy on each client, right? Which is what we have to do, and it's good for the company. But the model from the client's perspective is set up as a not forever model. This is a period of time, then you're going to go on your own way, right? To quote a Fleetwood Mac song, right? So if you think about the problems that are stacking up, they're always not in our favor when we're operating as hands, intellectual capital, and doers for these companies. And then finally, when the client says, hey, I have to do something else, the payor always wins, right? So the person that's paying the bill, maybe you try to negotiate better terms to end the contract. Hey, pay me for 3 more months, or pay me a reduced fee for the next 6 months, or something along those lines. But realistically, that payer, that client, controls what happens next. The payer always wins. So we have all of these things in these last 2 slides are things that are stacking up against us using the model that we've all built, which is I do the work for you. You pay me a fee. I hope it goes on for a long time because I can only handle 3 or 4 clients. And then all of a sudden, if someone leaves or something happens, what happens, right? So the project ends for whatever reason. I'm sure we've all been here, right? The project ends, and what is the option that we have as the fractional coach or consultant, right? It's kind of like not really great. We have the okay, and we have to accept it, and the hope is we end it nicely. We ended on a good note. It wasn't because there was something wrong. It was just something that had to end, and we accept it. And the hope is one day they will come back. They could be a reference for us or something along those lines. But essentially, it's just okay, right? The second thing we can do, this works sometimes, doesn't work other times, is we can negotiate with them. We can call their bluff as best you can, right? Now, sometimes, you might have it in your contract. Hey, if the project ends early, you pay us this amount, or all those kinds of things. But still, that goes back to the payer always wins. So as best we can negotiate and try to call their bluff to extend the project, keep it going, whatever it may be. And then the third option is, the suffer option, right? You shake your head and you say, there's nothing I can do. This is going to hurt, right? And then what is my response? What is my reaction? I know I'm kind of done. I put all this time, effort, and energy into this client. I gave them all my intellectual capital. They're no longer hungry. I've given them my hands. I've given them my time, and now I'm going to suffer, right? So when the project ends, in that instance, it becomes very difficult in a lot of different ways, right? Because we've short-circuited our business development, we've short-circuited our pipeline, we've short-circuited our, we might have some costs associated with that, all those sorts of things. So what happens when these things happen, when that client project ends? Panic sets in, right? And panic, for all of us who do this for a living, it's kind of always right below the surface, right? I can't tell today, right now, if my biggest client's biggest client, so their biggest client, went bankrupt today, or, closed shop, or sold the business, or they lost their biggest client, right? So the knock-on effect, the panic is always just below the surface. So what happens when that project ends? Here it comes, right? Okay, restart business development, right? You got to get that going. And there's going to be a lag time between that business development and the money coming in, right? The other thing is we can take projects that are less than ideal for us, right? And we call this, is your money green, right? In the beginning, when we started this business in 2010, the definition of a good client for us was anyone whose money was green and was willing to give it to us on a reasonably timely basis, right? So when you're kind of in that desperation, that roller coaster mode, and there's a lag time between finding the ideal client and finding any client, that there's a trade-off that happens there. And then we end up doing things that we don't want to do. And the reason we got into these businesses and what we do is because we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to compromise, right? So what's another thing that we end up doing as a result of this panic? We start working longer hours, right? Think about this. When we all started our business, I bet there was a feeling underneath the surface that said, I'm tired of working longer hours for someone else. I want to do it smarter, better, faster, my way, and not be working 14 hours a day anymore. I want to be working 8 hours a day, right? Or whatever it might be. But when we get to that panic mode, we start to do the things that we fall back on longer hours, right? The next thing we start to do is make short-term tactical decisions, i.e. mistakes, versus strategic planning, right? So when we get into that panic mode, we start, again, taking clients that we didn't want to, we start cutting our rates, we start, adding more services, whatever it might be. We make short-term tactical decisions because we have to do them for putting out today's fire versus looking out to that strategic planning and what we want our business to be and how we want it to operate. So the model is flawed, right? Essentially, if you look at all those slides, right, we are at the whims of the benevolent dictator, right? And I hope that this person here is smiling on it, but one day their sword will come out, right? So they're smiling today, but that doesn't mean that they'll be smiling on us tomorrow for whatever reason. It may not be because we did a bad job. It might be because we gave them, right? We gave them everything that we had. We gave them the time, right? We gave them the hands. We gave them the knowledge, right? And we satisfied their hunger, right? They're no longer hungry. So if you look at this model in all its ways, it's natural that the unstickiness of our model creates and drives the roller coasters in our revenue in our business. All right. So think of the benevolent dictator whenever we start with a new client or a client, because they are a benevolent dictator. If this person's client leaves them, there's going to be that knock-on effect as discussed earlier. That knock-on effect is going to roll downhill towards you, right? Or to the fractional and the consultant coach. So what's the answer, right? The answer is to create or leverage a sticky service. So I just put some examples of real sticky services that we probably all know. Verizon Wireless. I don't pay my phone bill. I don't talk on my phone, right? The Gillette company. So personal example, I shave, right? Obviously. I use a Gillette Mach 3 for probably the last 25 years. The only reason I use a Gillette Mach 3 is because at some point I bought the handle itself, which is a Gillette Mach 3, and I'm too cheap to go buy another one. So therefore, I am stuck, if I want to shave, with two choices. Either buy whole nother thing or buy their cartridges. And their cartridges are damn expensive. So now I'm rethinking this thing. But I've been with the Gillette company for 25 years for that silly reason. I can't use my handle without their cartridges. And then, the big one that I think which we're all comfortable with is Netflix, right? If I want that entertainment, if I want to watch that show, I want to watch that movie, I have to pay my bill, right? And if I don't pay my bill, I can't do it. So these are very sticky services. And so what I mentioned here is create or leverage, right? So one of the things, sometimes in some services, it might be very difficult, very expensive, right? Very time consuming to create your own sticky service, right? But there are plenty of people, there are plenty of things out there that you can leverage to create a sticky service, something that's already built, right? So in the example that I'm giving here, and this is not a sales pitch, I'm just using this as an example, is we created what we call a living handbook, Turning Point's a living employee handbook, which is a software as a service. Our clients, when we get a new client, they go on this model, and much like Verizon Wireless, if once we put their handbook on that system, they pay a monthly fee. So it's nominal, right? But that keeps them going, and that fee keeps their handbook up to date at all times, right? It's constantly updating, like literally it's a click of a button. So even though when we write a handbook for a client, so going back to that model of stickiness or the problems in the model, if a client leaves us for our generalized fractional services or our outsourced work, the stickiness remains behind in that employee handbook. So that could be the thing, a sticky model in your business or something you leverage with something else. Could be something that either keeps the client with you for a longer period of time, or if they decide to leave you, a little piece remains behind and keeps you engaged with that client and keeps you building that monthly recurring revenue, right? So these are the definitions of sticky, right? And again, what I encourage you to think of, it may be too difficult or out of the question to create your own, but it certainly doesn't mean there's other partners like Turning Point and others that have sticky services that you can bring to your clients that you can create a monthly recurring revenue stream off of for yourself, right? So I'm just going to use this as an example, as a discussion point. This is not a sales process, right? So why other fractionals have used our living handbook, right? Why? So this can help you decide other things that you might leverage. Every company needs one, right? There's very few companies that don't have an employee handbook. And if they don't, they really should. So it's a mainstream kind of a product. Netflix, Verizon, right? Gillette, something that everyone needs or most people need, and it's mainstream enough. So you're not really selling or reinventing the wheel, right? The second reason why people have used us or this product, or as an example, is the process, right? The process of how people traditionally write handbooks, they write it, by the time they write it, it's out of date, it goes in a drawer and it stays away. So the process that other firms are using is failing, right? It's not a smooth process. So find a sticky sticky product that you can leverage in your business from someone else who may have already built it, right? The other reason why people use this is time, right? Ours is 10 hours to write a handbook versus 100. So time perspective. So that's part of it. And then this becomes the definition of sticky. They're paying a monthly fee to keep their handbook on a system like Verizon. If they don't pay for it, their handbook that they've worked on goes away, right? But more importantly, it's constantly updating, just like your Verizon sends you updates into your system every couple of weeks, and accept this update. So it has the same level of stickiness. And I would encourage all of you to think about products that touch your business and people that that you can leverage their sticky product, right? So why people would work with us, and this is again this is to help you find sticky partners for your business that you can leverage. Referral fees, who controls it, you want to have weekly reporting, and but technology and the team behind it. So you want to find products from your that make sense for you to leverage with your clients to keep them sticky, to keep you engaged, right? That have these kinds of things, right? So that's the presentation, just to whet your appetite a little bit. So with that said, the goal is the model is broken. The model is broken because we have not, and I mean we collectively, have not built stickiness into it. We've used our intellectual capital, our time, and our hands to build the business that we have. But the problem is that the client controls the dance, the benevolent dictator. And there are things that go on at the benevolent dictator that we can't control. Right? We just can't. the knock-on effect of what's happening in their business, the what happens when they're no longer hungry and they no longer need the service, right? And then ultimately the final problem is when that project has to end for whatever those reasons, what is the recourse that we have? And my solution is find sticky products, leverage sticky products. If you can create your own sticky product, even better, but that's, sometimes that's difficult to do. So with that said, I kept to my 30 minutes, 29 minutes. So there's a chat function on the left-hand side of your screen. So Dennis, we want to see Tuna. Tuna left. But so if there are any questions, any thoughts, please just throw it in the chat function there. I can share with you how I built my sticky product, how you can leverage sticky products from someone else, how you can get paid on other sticky products, those sorts of things. So I will hold on a moment or two. So if anyone has any questions, please just throw it into the chat function, and then I will be happy to answer anything. Okay, so if there are, I'll put my email address. I'll put my email address in here if anyone would like to set a time to talk separately. I'd be happy to do so, to talk about what things what things may make sense in your business to do that. And I appreciate it all. So I will have this recording up on our YouTube page probably by tomorrow or so, and then you can review it, share it, see it, whatever it might be. So with that said, I want to thank everyone, and have a great day. Talk to you soon.